The intention of us connecting today is really around the events of the week of the 12th of July, in what was probably a frenzy of looting and arson around South Africa, concentrated specifically in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. The events, which many people describe as the most significant in the last 25 years, impacted South Africa and arguably the broader region to its core. In many instances, what was felt was an assault on personal safety, an interruption of our supply chain, and a fundamental shock to the way of life in many communities. However, what we've shown in the couple of weeks that have happened subsequently is the strength, grit, and resilience of a people who are focused on building back and on building back better. And as I've said, this is the first of a three-part series focused on equipping businesses to do exactly that. This first part sees us taking stock post-unrest and asking key leaders if we were prepared enough. And if we weren't, what are we going to do looking forward? We've got a great lineup of panelists for you today who were really at the coalface of what happened in that week. Naru Hoffman joins us from the Western Cape, where he's the head of group insurance for the largest retailer on the African continent, Shoprite. Keketso Motsweni joins us from KwaZulu-Natal. He's the regional executive for Absa for KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga, covering relationship banking at the bank. Tamara Parker is the Chief Executive Officer for Mercer, one of the companies within Marsh McLennan globally, and a privilege to have her here today covering some of the aspects around people. And then we've got the Managing Director for Marsh Specialty in Africa, Shivan Hutton, who joins us from Sandton in Johannesburg today too. As we move on to the next slide, if you have any questions, to submit a question, if you scroll your cursor over the bottom of your screen, you will find the Q&A functionality in the lower left-hand side. Type in your question and click submit, and our panelists will be able to pick those up as we go through the afternoon. If a question is not answered during today's session, we from Marsh will endeavor to respond to your question as soon as possible with the answer. Please, let's make sure it's an engaging session. It's a great opportunity to have these people around the table. So I encourage you to ensure that you ask any questions that you have on points of interest or that could help you and your business in terms of where you're at this point in time. Thanks, Nobu. So as we move on to the next slide, just spending some time recapping the events of what was probably the 12th to the 19th of July in South Africa. And if you all take your mind back to that day, I wonder what you were doing, what you were thinking, and how these events unfolded in your life. There was extensive damage across the country: 161 malls, 11 warehouses, 8 factories, and 161 liquor distributors. Significant fire damage and perhaps the point around arson across the country as well in 100 of those 161 malls, and approximately 3,000 stores were looted. Something I'm looking at picking up with Keketso in respect of the ATMs or damage to ATMs, but over 1,400 damage across the country and 300 bank and post office outlets also being vandalized. What does that mean for immediate responses and services to clients? But also, what does that mean going forward? Will banks and retailers and other industries look to build back in the same way? Or how are we recalibrating and re-engineering our businesses to move forward? A significant number of infrastructure and communications post-damage. I believe at last count there was 113 cell phone towers and other communication towers that were damaged. And importantly now, as we start to track what are the kind of economic considerations in terms of job security, 150,000 jobs at risk, 50,000 informal traders affected, and 40,000 businesses affected. I'm keen to hear from the businesses that we've got on the show today, on the webinar today, Absa and Shoprite, in respect of what they're doing in this space and how they're using the opportunity to build back better. Before we kick off, though, I want to have a quick poll where we're going to ask each of the attendees a question on how did your business fare during this period of civil unrest. So how did your business fare during this period of civil unrest? The poll will come up now and we'll give you 30 seconds to answer. The questions that you'll receive or the answer potential answers are: you were not prepared and you were severely hit by the latest unrest. Your company was not hit, but it was a close shave, or your company is not in an industry, but that was at risk of being hit. So Nobu, if I could ask you to put up the poll now, thank you. Let's see, I think we might be having a technical glitch with our poll. We might have to hold on to run that a little bit later. So let's continue on, and we can do that a little bit later on. I think as we begin to recount and rethink about that week, let me start with Leroux Hoffman, who is the head of insurance for the Shoprite Group in Africa. Leroux, what were you doing when the news first broke? Maybe tell us a little bit about how the news landed and how the events that happened subsequently unfolded.
Yes, thank you, Zariel. If I remember correctly, it was that Sunday that the news broke for me personally. So I think I went for a run, and when I came back, there was about 100 odd WhatsApp messages. The whole, I want to say almost the whole corporation has already started kicking in terms of risk management. So from that day, we started almost, I want to say, a JOC, a Joint Operations Control Command Center, sharing information. I think the first couple of days was a lot about just taking stock of where we have been hit and the extent of losses that we've suffered. And I think that was basically that first 5 days really was multiple briefings a day, between the CEO and Exco and myself. Earliest we began at 5 o'clock in the morning, and some of the days we finished off at 10, and really just assessing, what's the situation on the ground. From a logistical perspective, can we send trucks out? Can we not send trucks out? Which roads are open? Which roads are not open? And just basic risk management. I think in times like what we've had during that week, I think the theoretical side of yourself will say, you want to open the business continuity booklet or the disaster recovery booklet, but practically when something like this happened that we all went through, you have to make decisions quickly. And you have to make decisions based on accurate information. So there's really not a lot of time to go study a 100-page book about risk management or disaster recovery. It's really, I guess, involving the right people internally and making the correct decisions swiftly.
Maybe you can, so you visited KwaZulu-Natal that week, right? Or shortly after. Can you give us a sense of what things were like on the ground, and maybe just take us into your war room and, give us a sense of what it was like in the Shoprite world at that time?
Yeah, look, the first week when this kicked off, I guess it started on the Saturday, which was the 10th, and then we suffered most of our losses between that Monday, the 12th, and I would say the Thursday, Friday, the 15th, 16th. So that week was quite surreal sitting here, and I guess the second part of it was visiting then KZN the following week. So same team involved in decisions, flew up in I guess in multiple aircraft. So it was about a team of 25 to 30 of us that went up to Pietermaritzburg and Durban to assess the stores and the distribution centers. And for me, that was pretty surreal. I've been to a lot of fire-ravaged sites, specifically Shoprite stores across Africa. We've had, over the years, we've been unfortunate with fires in Angola and Mauritius, Zambia, Mozambique. I've also been to some severely flooded sites, like we've had with Mozambique, for instance, 2 years ago with those big floods. But this was a unique experience, since from the day, from the moment we landed there till we flew out 2 days later, almost a eerie calmness. The sort of just visibly seeing the devastation between province-wide. And I guess also just seeing the spray paint on the walls and just seeing the just taking in the whole event was quite surreal.
Brilliant. I mean, thanks for sharing that. I've got a series of questions in my mind after what you just said. So a reminder to all of the people listening to this call, please punch in your questions in the chat functionality or use the Q&A, and we can pick them up with Leroux and the team. Kiket, so maybe we can segue over to you. Being resident in KwaZulu-Natal, the banking fraternity significantly shocked by what happened. But what were some of the practical things happening on the ground with Absa at the time?
Yeah, thanks, Aurel. I think if one was to just go back, and our experience is very similar to what Leroux has shared, and I think at some point we who were closer to the sort of issues, because we are here in the province, did not necessarily get our information from the media, and a lot of the colleagues that we had who were outside of the province were actually quite perturbed, if one was to maybe reflect. So I think one of the things that was a great challenge, if you look at the number of colleagues just across the organization that we have in KwaZulu-Natal alone, there's in excess of 2,000. And as we were checking in with colleagues, so on Sunday, the day before, that lonely Monday, we took a number of decisions in terms of closing our branches, in terms of also reinforcing our work from home for that particular week. The reason why I say that is because whilst our colleagues work from home, a lot of them still do see customers at their premises, etc. So we sort of suspended all that in trying to protect, the livelihoods and for the safety of our colleagues. But what became interesting is that when we then started doing our check-ins, which at the time, Monday, we probably had 3 or 4 a day, we then started getting a sense of how this was affecting the team. Some colleagues needed baby formula, people needed food, and it was now, becoming a bit of a challenge. And one of the important elements from our perspective was to say, how do we ensure that, the colleagues still benefit from the community that we are as a bank in the province? How do we also look after some of the parents of the colleagues that are outside of the province? So it really became more of a community issue more than it was a banking issue. I think the banking decisions were quite easy, because all we do is we lock the branches, we alert our group security, and we are on high alert. But you could not dissociate yourself from a colleague that is somewhere very close to the danger, who calls and says, I have a problem, can you please help me? And I think that's sort of what consumed us. It was more around ensuring that the livelihoods of our colleagues and their safety is at the fore. We did a lot of work. I mean, I've never packed so many groceries in bags that Sunday, because we then, as an organization, took a decision that we're going to deliver what we call the care pack, to all our colleagues within the next 3 days from that Monday. Became quite a challenge, because you had to get, food from outside the province. We remember a lot of us that were in the province queuing for milk and bread, and you can imagine having to get food to 2,000 people, what was involved in that. And by the way, we do not purport to be logistics managers, we are bankers, and some of these things, really required us to step off our roles and say, as humans and as leaders in this particular crisis, what role are we going to play? So there's quite a number of things that we did. I mean, there was communication, ensuring that setting up of the province in Gauteng, for instance, we had some isolated events, but by and large, the impact was in KZN, and we still had the whole organization supporting us, in terms of setting up a contact center to ensure that each colleague is contacted to assess their needs, to get a sense of whether they need some assistance, psychological assistance, or any other form of assistance. And I think looking back at that, I mean, whilst we were caught off guard, but the reality of the matter is the machinery within the organization sort of realigned itself very quickly, to respond to what we saw.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Maybe it'd be interesting to ask Tamara that the question from a people side as well. I mean, if I just think about kind of the culmination or representing this event as the culmination of many events, I mean, people have had significant challenges over the last kind of 12 to 18 months. First COVID, a series of lockdowns, now civil unrest. I'd say that emotions are probably high. Tamara, what are you seeing in terms of the key people risks and opportunities in the space? I suppose just putting in from some of the challenges that Kiketso's articulated.
Yeah, and so thanks, Kiketso, and hello everyone. And I think, Leroux, there was a question to you, so I'm going to come back to you in a second. But I think one of the things we spoke about when we went into this was, in some ways, COVID gave us the ability to think about people, right? So there might have been many organizations that didn't have people top of mind prior to COVID. And I think in a way what happened in July, a lot of organizations were already prepped to thinking about the impact on people first, right? And I think, Kiketso, your example just speaks for it. We know that our employees are the storytellers in communities, right? So when it comes to reputational risk, and I'm not saying we must think about people only because of our reputation, but I think it is something when we think about risk management that we consider. From a reputational risk, I think the organizations that spend time and efforts on looking after their people while doing the other things in the background, that's really good for business. We talk about a multi-stakeholder model these days, or a multi-shareholder model, right? So it's not just your shareholders that own shares. And I saw there was a question to Absa and to Shoprite around international shareholders. But I think what we understand more than ever going forward into the future is that your stakeholders include the communities that you work in, the lobby group that could might be able to impact the name of your reputation of your business and so on. And so that even when it comes to crises, we need to consider all of those different stakeholders within our business, people being one of them. So I think from a reputational risk point of view. And then I think as Mercer, we always speak about being on the intersection of empathy and economics. We understand the kind of things that drive the bottom line, but we need to have empathy if we're going to be able to succeed, not just in terms of what happened in Durban in July or KwaZulu-Natal, but also in terms of what happened with COVID. And I think what that means is, we know that there's things like engagement. The more engaged an employee is, the more that they're going to give to your business. And we can disengage employees very quickly when in times of crisis, we ignore them and we worry about our supply chain, right? Or we worry about the stores that we have. You can never bring those people back into engagement. Once you've lost them, once they think that you as a leader don't care about them or where they are, you can lose them. But in Kiketso's case, with Absa and the provision of these care packages, you probably got massive engagement from your employees, and they just want to give back to Absa now, right? So I think what you did, Kiketso, what an amazing thing to do for your employees. And I know Shoprite has done similar. So I'm going to let Kiketso speak, and then I want to hear from Leroux as well.
Yeah, sure, thanks, definitely. And Tamara, quite interesting is that we did not want to get any form of return from that. It was more, so it was not strategic. It was more, there is a need right now, and we are placed, in a position where as an organization, we can get 3 trucks, to drive from Johannesburg under a heavy guard to bring food into the province, whereas, our colleagues might not necessarily have that form of muscle. So definitely, I think the things that we do in times of crisis that are probably propelled by us just responding to the needs, have a far more, reaching results in the long term. Definitely. I mean, if I look at, I saw some of the colleagues on LinkedIn. I didn't expect this to appear there. And I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it all over social media. I've seen it in our internal sort of, workplace collaboration spaces. So it's really been an interesting one. But definitely is that if we did not respond with our heart at that particular moment, it would probably be quite difficult trying to demonstrate that element of care. So definitely.
LaRue, maybe we can pick up from your side, because I know ShopRite had done quite a bit in respect of the people element too. How did a number of your colleagues, I imagine, had to kind of get back in and get stores moving again. So how do you balance that aspect of economics and empathy in your context?
Yeah, I guess firstly, as we started closing stores, the clear message we had from the day one was that everyone will still earn their salaries. Job security is not an issue. I guess that's initially what you want to hear. If you're an employee working at a store, you are maybe a single breadwinner, or quite keen in your family in terms of income. So that was the message right from the start. We've never been in a space where we retrench people. I guess just the nature of our business. We open stores quite regularly. We open, we might close stores, but then we redeploy those employees to new stores that's opening.
It's fantastic.
So I think the message right from the start, and then also now, after most of the stores as we opened, and now we're sitting with a few that's going to take longer due to landlord issues or due to just the sheer devastation or destruction. Those employees is also we have not furlonged them. They're still on our payroll. We've also provided them with a care line, and so forth. So yeah, I mean that's key. I mean you need your employees to be engaged. I mean that's excluding the community element to it. We are very close to our communities where we trade through all of our brands. So there was a lot of support we also gave to the affected communities in terms of in terms of shopping vouchers and just food and the like. So that's key. Community is key, and then obviously employees and keeping them engaged, like Tamara mentioned.
That's fantastic. I mean, maybe we can pause here and get some feedback. I think we're ready to run that poll. So Nobubele, if I could ask you to click it up now, that would be great. How did your business fare in the recent civil unrest? We've heard from two of the African greats, ShopRite and Absa. So I'm keen to hear your view. Please click on one of the options now and click submit at the bottom. My company was not prepared, and we were severely hit by the latest unrest. My company was not hit hard. It was not hit, but it was a close shave. And my company is not in an industry that was at risk of being hit. If you can submit your answers now, click on one of those and click submit, and we'll close that in the next kind of 10 seconds or so and see what the view from around the table is. We can close that poll now, Nobu, and share the results. Thank you. Geez, fantastic. So interesting. 15% saying we were not prepared, 36% saying it was a close shave, and almost 50% saying my company was not in an industry that was at risk of being hit. So I mean, maybe LaRue, I can pick up with you again. So you've shared stories of being in a war room. You've given us kind of the view of getting onto a plane and getting down to KZN. How prepared were you? I mean, if you look at it as a business, how prepared were you in respect to what you had in place and the events that unfolded?
Yeah, I guess we were quite well prepared. I think COVID also gave a lot of corporates opportunity to prepare for something as unforeseen and that affects the business as much that these riots did. I guess one can also ask how prepared was South Africa Inc. And government.
Yeah.
I think what we've learned over the years is that even though we there is military, there is police, we can't wait for insurers or second lines of defense almost to kick in. So I guess we were pretty prepared in terms of the controllables, what we could control in terms of our own employees, logistics, our own security, And I think what was key just for us from the start was because we knew that this was not going to be a 1 or a 2 day thing, and we knew that that national road, the N3 between Gauteng and Durban, was going to be closed essentially for, well, we knew it was going to be at least a week. I think it ended up being about 3 or 4 weeks. It was key for us just make sure that we protect our distribution centers in the province, in KZN specifically. And we went to great lengths to actually protect our larger DC, the Canaan's DC in north of Tongaat, and also in Gauteng. We've seen from, we've gone through a couple of I would say either civil unrest or labor related issues where logistics is key. And I think what also preceded this for us, personally, was that we, this was not new for us in the sense that we also trade in Nigeria. We did up until recently. So Nigeria also went through the same spate of unrest, if you remember correctly, about a year or two ago. They actually had 2 instances. They had 2019 and 2018, if I remember correctly. And then obviously just preceding this, we had Swaziland as well, Eswatini that also went through their own problems at the end of June. So I guess you can't give yourself a mark out of 10 because the devastation was clear and obvious. But I think the one thing was being adequately prepared in terms of control. And the other one was reinstating as quickly as possible. And I think there's also a very good story to tell.
That's fantastic. I mean, and look forward to sharing those stories in a bit with us. I think I want to pick up on the point you made. I mean, so while we're very clearly focused on the events happening in South Africa and the effects across the broader region. I mean, you've mentioned Nigeria, you've mentioned Eswatini. Shiv, maybe I can bring you in. I mean, you've been with our global organization for a number of years now. And I think that while there are many aspects of these circumstances that are unique to South Africa, there are a number of distinct parallels in respect of these events and other events across the world. Can you share some of your insights and learnings from the global organization in kind of putting it all together?
Yeah, thanks, Cyril. So yeah, being part of a global risk and insurance organization, I think we often get exposed to events that have a wide-ranging and damaging impact on communities around the world, whether that's riots, natural catastrophe events, hurricanes, floods, earthquake, or a variety of other events. So what happened in South Africa was significant, and as we've heard today, very devastating from a community standpoint, and the impact on people and on the economy shouldn't be understated. But there's definitely patterns around some of the things that we've seen here to elsewhere as well. From a business standpoint, as we've heard today, being able to support employees and the workforce is so important. Delivering food packages to 2,000 employees, as Kiketso mentioned, it's difficult to practice those until the event happens. And then the other priority is ensuring that the business gets back up and running and continues to operate and restart operations as soon as possible. Business continuity plans are really important to have for the post-event recovery efforts. But as Leroux mentioned, in the middle of the crisis, you're not going to be looking through a manual to do that. But as he also referred to, knowing who to contact, resolving issues quickly, and making quick decisions is really important. And preparation is key in terms of limiting damage and reinstating business as quickly as possible. So kind of that continuity plans, whether it's there or not, it's important to kind of have that in the back of your mind. And just as a parallel, I was thinking about it, around the similar sort of time, the floods in Germany happened. And if we look at the impact of those, they caused havoc in the community, to people and to businesses. It has to be said, that a number of the measures that they put in place, learning from historical events, physical kind of infrastructure measures and risk mitigation activity, has really helped to kind of prevent some of the losses to both, and the impact to both people and businesses and the community at large. So learning from kind of previous experiences and the plans that were put in place for that recurring event was quite important, I would say.
I mean, it's an important point. I mean, as we contemplate or start to contemplate the risks section of it, and for the second half of the hour now move into a conversation on recovery, I'd like to ask Norbele to pull up the second poll, which seeks to question the risk and the impact of risk on your business. So what was the most challenging risk exposure that you had to navigate within your business? So wherever you are, was it supply chain related? Are you in financial services, for example, and you had the people concern of your team in those territories? Was it asset protection, or is the biggest challenge kind of rebuilding and the associated planning? If I could ask you to submit your answer to that question now, and we'll then just take a couple of seconds to recalibrate before I pivot over to Keketso and ask him some questions around recovery. But Norbele, maybe you can share the answers of that with us now. Interesting. So fairly even split between supply chain, people, and asset protection, and not too much focus in terms of the rebuild and associated planning. I mean, Keketso, I'd like to ask you the question. Tell us about your recovery as Absa. So I think the people focus comes through very heavily in terms of how you address the problem initially, but as a bank operating within those areas, and as you've highlighted KwaZulu-Natal in particular, tell me about your recovery. And I'm keen to focus particularly on technology, because the banks have really been a step ahead here. Although, Leroux, I'm very excited about what I read about Shoprite X in the media recently. But from a banking perspective, how did technology help your recovery?
Thanks, Uriel. So perhaps if we just look at the whole sector, so the damage, so there's over 1,200 ATMs, within the banking sector that were damaged. You look at about 310 branches just overall, and in excess of 250 ATMs, of which, interesting enough, in this number, and this is open to interpretation, but 36 ATMs were physically stolen and they are not yet recovered. So quite interesting there in terms of what was at play here. But if we look at where we are, from our perspective, is that you have to marry technology with practicality. So if I look at what became a big challenge, is that you look at a town like Nongoma, which is in the northern, of the northern KZN, where we really have quite a number of SASSA recipients who would not necessarily, if you look at the profile of client that we are looking at here, these are customers that really need to go to an ATM and withdraw the grant so that somehow, they can provide for the needs of their families. So technology means something different, to that client. But you also have a customer who is very much technologically savvy. And what we've done is, and this has been a culmination of a journey that we've embarked on over a number of years, is that today there isn't really much that one cannot do with their cell phone. And when we look at times like that, is that that became more of a tool of business and a tool of communicating with the bank as a primary tool, because in some cases our branches were completely gutted. What we then did, and I said technology, from a recipient of a grant, etc., who might not necessarily, who heavily relies on cash, we have what we call Bangkok Wheels. So these are really minibuses that are banked. We deployed all of our minibuses. We don't have a lot. If you look at what we do, but all of the buses that we have in the country were all redirected, to KwaZulu-Natal, and we placed them in the different sort of municipalities where we knew that there's a heavy reliance on cash, but we are unable to provide the services because the infrastructure is damaged. Now the other thing is, if we look at where we are, Zuriel, I think we are at the point where we have to determine as an industry whether it's going to be fully digital or it's not going to be fully digital. If you look at the journey that we are on right now, there's quite a number of debates. I think we often find competitors, going virtual channel and then going physical channels. And I think that's pretty much where we are. And it's exciting because the number of lessons that we are finding now are actually quite critical, because the segmentation of customers in terms of, understanding the needs of the different segments of our community, business, individuals, high net worth individual, etc. I think how we are applying technology and how we are marrying that with the physical presence is really important. And this event or this sort of inconvenience actually catapulted some of the lessons, and we realized that in some cases that in Nongoma, it does not matter how many times you push an SMS that says use your digital channels. The moment you park a truck there or a bus there with an ATM, the queue is going to be very long, because people still heavily rely on cash. So it's really just understanding that. And I think we've really spent some time, and I say this because when you deal with unrest, when you deal with issues of the pandemic, etc., the response of one individual bank is not as important as what the industry is doing. And if I look at what the Banking Association has done, in terms of guiding the process, and also just creating a space for us to communicate numbers, to communicate impact, etc., I think it has really helped us as an industry in terms of saying how do we then rebuild, which is the next part of the journey that we are on.
So, quick follow-up question there then, Kiketso. Were these events a catalyst in respect of how you will run your operation? Have they kind of fast-forwarded any plans that you may have had or been thinking of, or created new ones?
So definitely. So if you look at what happened when we closed our branches, we probably went on for another 2 weeks because we wanted to just make sure that the safety of our customers and colleagues, is put at the center of what we're doing. We found an opportunity in some cases to redirect some of our colleagues into other roles where, as we speak right now, some of them have permanently moved on into other roles that have a much better scope in terms of where they are. So that has also created some form of career pathing, and we were forced, because we now have an individual who wants to be put into use, staying at home, and you then find opportunities to say in the organization, how do we then make use of what they are doing. We are in the process of just redefining our private wealth offering, etc. And a lot of those opportunities came where some of the colleagues who were branch based have now moved into the sort of the private wealth support and also private wealth banking, which is quite good and nice for them. I don't think would have been as quick as that, because we now had colleagues who are sitting and saying, hey, we need to be engaged, and we then found those opportunities. I think from a colleague perspective, that's that. In terms of rebuilding, I think the way that we look at our infrastructure is actually going to be quite interesting now, because going forward, it's a matter of saying, do we use this as an opportunity, maybe in some cases where we had bigger branches that were not put to good use, make them smaller, or where we had smaller branches, make them bigger. I think because you are having to decide now, and I mean, like with every other organization, we never just move on and just replace like for like. So I think that has also just created that opportunity for us just to relook at the size of our infrastructure and the location where those opportunities are available.
That's some interesting lessons. I mean, I want to ask you, Leroux, how is this going to affect your business and operating model moving forward? So what, how is this? I imagine in respect to Shoprite, right? You've got massive distribution centers located across the country. You've got branches in well, I mean, this is kind of not a corner you turn and you don't see a Shoprite or a Checkers or one of the brands in your stable. So what does this mean for the Shoprite group moving forward? How have these events affected or brought forward any of your plans around your operating model?
Look, Zariel, I think there's definitely a human element to it. So I think there's still a lot. Time helps a lot to heal wounds, but I think it's still going to take some time. There's definitely still some unresolved frustrations and issues, and I guess we've been seeing it. And I mean these riots wouldn't necessarily have been a surprise to all of us. But I mean, we as a corporation will deal with that where we can in terms of assisting communities. I think from a company point of view, there's a lot of opportunities, I guess. Where we can take over leases, or where we can continue to grow our footprint in a responsible manner, we'll attempt to do that. So I guess from where this leaves us as a company, on a human element, it's not great, because there has been a lot of trauma, and we've been dealing that with some of our own employees, and that's going to take time. From a financial element, there's definitely opportunities, and I guess from an operational point of view, as we were fortunate not to lose any one of our, I would say, key strategic assets, it's the effect is I would say is quite small operationally. I don't foresee this as hampering our growth in the short to medium term.
Fantastic. I mean, maybe just a quick follow-on from that then. As we build up to the festive season and festive season readiness, am I still going to be able to get what I need at Checkers? How's the supply chain been affected?
Yeah, initially there was quite a bit of I think initially we all thought we would by this time have run out of sugar, and I see we can still buy sugar in the shops. So because some of those industries that were, as were heavily affected. All of those sugar mills, for instance, had to close, and a lot of destruction with the fire. So at the moment, I'm not a buyer, unfortunately, myself, so I can't comment on specific lines. But at the moment, it's I guess it's more it's more for us. It's more like a macro environment. So for instance, with that big with the third largest port in the world in China going down for about 2 or 3 weeks last month, that impacted not only us but I guess the whole world in terms of supply chain. If one of those 3, 4, 5 largest ports in the world, if like we've seen now with the I think it was Gibraltar, with that being stuck, it's massive. It causes huge, massive supply issues. But I think we're good at the moment.
Maybe I want to pick up some of the questions from the audience around some of these issues. Selvin Govender asks the question. He says there are potentially numerous systemic issues that resulted in this unfortunate event. Do corporates like Shoprite and Absa focus on reacting to what happened, or can and will they also play a role in helping, I'm assuming at a macro level with government, to resolve the systemic root causes? Who would like to pick that up? Ketso, can I start with you, maybe? Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, Zoro. Let me give it a step. So if you look at Absa, who we are in KwaZulu-Natal, so we sit on a number of chambers of commerce and industry. We also sit on a number of other sort of prestigious business formations like Growth Coalition, where you have access to the premier, you have access to the mayor of eThekwini, which is the biggest municipality in the province. So if I just look at the amount of time that myself and colleagues have spent over the last few weeks in terms of the rebuild project, if I look at the number of resources that we have actually directed, for instance, to the Gift of the Givers, to all other sort of NGOs that are doing work in the province, I think there's a clear understanding that we need to respond firstly by guiding from a business voice perspective, because I mean it's always going to be a collective in the province, and say this is what we see. I mean, we've got a number of sessions where we've been very honest with the powers that be from a government perspective, to say from our perspective this is what we have seen and this is what we think can probably help. in terms of just rebuilding and also creating, stability. If we look at our biggest worry, I guess, as business, is that there are a number of large corporates that are headquartered in KwaZulu-Natal, and the devastation of one of these big corporates deciding that their headquarters will move out of the province. There's jobs. There's also quite a number of things, and there are a few that are reliant on the harbour, but you also have, sort of commercial and business finance, heavyweights here who can be based anywhere in the country. So I think that confidence is a matter of saying, how do we collectively, contribute to building and also, informing government what we see, because whilst they are, the leaders from a governance perspective, from a business perspective, there are a number of insights that we've been able to share with them and what we see. So I think the rebuild project is going to be quite a demanding one. If I just look at beyond infrastructure, the social sort of contract that was broken, through the events that we have seen and that followed.
That's helpful. Thanks, Kikit. So, Tamara, maybe a question to pick up with you. Charles Bierkus asks, how important is it to be resilient in your business practices, and how are you increasing resilience going forward? Maybe just in terms of what you've seen, through these circumstances, if you could give us a tomorrow.
I think that for the past decade or so, we've been talking about the digital economies and what that means to be resilient and agile. And everyone thinks they understand what an agile organization is, but I'm not sure we do. So I think that's one thing. You need to have an agile organization in terms of the way you build it, in terms of the way you resource it, and in terms of the way you're looking at skills and the ability to learn things quickly. And we know from our research that the competencies that organizations are looking for right now, and I think that ties into what we're saying, are the ability to self-manage. In other words, you don't need somebody to tell you what to do, but you just understand where your business is going and you get on with it. Critical thinking, so being able to, even Leroux in a crisis, I think that your critical mind kicked in, right? Even though you were under pressure, because you're able to think about what's coming next. And then the ability to learn, lifelong learners. And I think everything that we're seeing right now around the way in which things are going to in the future is to ensure that you've got people in your organization that have those three overarching capabilities. And then being flexible, agile, ability to make decisions fast. I think digital helps us in all of those things. So I think if you had, I'm sure, Kikit, so that you had a digital way of getting hold of all your employees, right? You push a button and it sends a message and everyone has to respond, so you know where they are. Can you imagine trying to get hold of 2,000 employees if you didn't have the technology to be able to do those things? That would have been insanity. So I think just being, on the forefront of technology and understanding what that means.
When we talk about flexibility and agility, Shiv, and maybe I can pull you in. How flexible and agile have the insurance markets been? How have they responded? I'm asking you purposefully. I'll keep Leroux and Kiketso's answers for later. But how flexible and agile do you think insurance markets have been through this process?
Well, look, so insurance seems like an insignificant part of this conversation in the context that we've had over the last 50 minutes. But I think it has a huge role to play, particularly in such large-scale events. Firstly, in terms of making sure valid claims are paid efficiently and seamlessly to support recovery, albeit the volume of claims in South Africa clearly can create challenges in and around this, as it is an accumulation event and it has a kind of large aggregate claim overall. But I do have to say, insurance markets are very resilient, and particularly in this particular kind of line of business, political violence. 20 years on from kind of 9/11, it's a very well capitalized market, and with the underlying protection from SASRIA, you'd expect it to be very robust going forward as well.
That's a positive outlook, I think, particularly in light of what we've seen in the media, right, in the last week or so. I think some hard facts to face, but probably a bit of an emotive situation at the moment too. It's interesting as you contrast the events of 20 years ago, to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Leroux, I want to ask you this question. There's a question from Simon Baker. He says, I think Absa and Shoprite both have international shareholders and investors. are you able to share what the sentiment has been, Leroux, from the international community? And then as a follow-on from that, can rebuilding be done in a more riot-proof way? So firstly, what is the vibe and sentiment from your international stakeholders, and can you rebuild in a more riot-proof way?
Yeah. So we've had I've also been involved in a few of those feedback meetings with some of our stakeholders, our shareholders, our banks, etc. So yeah, I guess it's twofold. There's a concern, there's a request for information, there's a request for how much were we affected, and then secondly, it's not necessarily unique to South Africa what we've seen now in terms of mass riots. We've had the same in Africa, like I mentioned, in the last couple of years, and then we've also had worldwide. I mean, what we've seen going on in the East, Hong Kong, South America, even with COVID, now with some of developed markets and countries, what we've seen there. So, I guess it's been the sentiment of I guess concern and disappointment, and wanting to know the extent from a shareholder point of view, wanting to know the extent of the losses. And then can rebuilding be done in a more riot-proof way? That's an interesting question. We've actually now, we have now started also looking at that and saying not necessarily at our stores, but at our distribution centers. When you have to make decisions in terms of should it be a palisade fence or should it be a brick wall, and how high should be the wall, and how thick should it be? So I guess that's where we're going. We've done a lot on security the last number of years. We have you would have seen it in the media. We have quite a big, we call it the command center. So we have we have quite a big security operation where we appoint our own attorneys, we appoint our own prosecutors, we have our own investigators. So when we do have crime or any those types of incidences, we basically want to be in a position to give the full docket to the police when they move over to prosecution. So we have really ramped up in terms of security. I think the sad thing is it's more a case of displacement than it is a case of where, in terms of crime specifically, where you decrease crime, that requires everyone to be hands on deck. I guess also to the previous question, what can us as responsible corporates do? I mean, I guess you can never do enough. You can never do enough for the community or to try and change some of the dynamics in the country. But yeah, in terms of riot-proof way, we've I think at store level we've been successful. It's sad to say, but we've been successful to displace some of not necessarily riots, but in terms of crime at our stores to some of our competitors maybe. Looking obviously technology is a big thing. So that's basically where everything is going with closed circuit cameras. But I think that the other element to it is each industry is unique, but our industry is still very customer centric. So you can't, you want to create a positive, welcoming environment in our industry, especially. I don't see our industry ever going in a direction where you'll have 5 to 10 security guards standing outside and looking at you unfriendly when you walk into the store. That's just not the nature of our industry. So we really try and create the most welcome environment at our stores. And then I guess on top of it, just spending more money protecting our key and strategic assets, which would be predominantly our larger distribution centers.
That's helpful. I think Malibuya had a question in the chat, which you've in part answered. It's amazing we talk about technology, but if I look at the media, it seems one of your most effective risk management measures was cooking oil. in a story that made global headlines. We have run out of time. I was looking forward to asking for your comments on that. Maybe you can do so in closing comments. But before we go around the table, I want to ask you a question, Shiv, 30 seconds. What global lessons are there to build back better? What have we seen? Leroux spoke about the effects across the continent, and you also gave us some insight. What are the global lessons to build back better?
I think in 30 seconds, tough one to answer, but these events are often a catalyst for change and for improvement, and people and businesses are incredibly resilient and innovative, and as a community, we all come together and work towards building a better future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shiv. Tamara, closing comments from your side in 30 seconds.
30 seconds. I think just being very clear about the skills we need for the future, making sure that we're managing businesses with a balance of empathy and economics. And yeah, I think that's about it. 30 seconds, less.
Fantastic. And Keketso, from your perspective.
Yeah, the rebuild project is going to take much longer, and I think as an organization, we have actually availed ourselves to say, how do we partner with all the respective parties, because we have realized that this is a much bigger responsibility than can rest on a single sort of entity. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And Leroux, finally, from your perspective, some final words in respect to building back better.
Yeah, no, I must just say that the cooking oil, it's not the formal company policy, so you won't find that in a disaster recovery or a business continuity plan. But I mean, it was probably a person that fought on his feet, and that Tugela Ferry Mall, that was coincidentally the only shop in the mall that hence wasn't looted. So it served its purpose.
Yeah.
I guess last closing 10 seconds. No, it's been difficult. I mean, we won't lie. It's really been tragic. I mean, to some extent. And but I mean, I guess we're here to stay. And I mean, we're one of the most beautiful countries with one of the most precious metals and minerals and friendliest people, to be honest. I mean, so we're here to stay, and we're here to build back stronger and better.
That's a powerful finish. It's a powerful finish. Thanks so much to you, Leroux, and to the other panelists today, Shivan Hutton from Marsh Specialty, Tamara Parker, the CEO of Mercer, and Keketso Motsweni from KwaZulu-Natal, the Regional Executive or Managing Executive for Absa. It's been great to share the stories and insights from around the table today with a number of people from across the country, people from businesses, some of whom are clients of ours, some of whom are not, people from other risk and advisory firms. It's been great to have you here too, and also people from insurance companies. So thank you for joining us today, and thanks again to the panel. I think clearly two powerhouse businesses, Absa and Shoprite, businesses we are proud to partner with on the African continent. But what stood out for me most there is the focus on people, and what Shoprite and Absa have done, committed to their teams and committed to their clients in respect of building back better. And I see Tamara with Mercer being one of the leading people consultancies on the continent. A massive round of applause. Thank you very much. We'll be back for a second and third insert to build back better. In the meantime, if you have any queries in respect of how we can help your business build back better, please reach out via your client executive or to Shivan or myself directly on LinkedIn or any other platform. But thanks very much once again, and we'll connect soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.